News Talk KVNU.
The information from the pretty balanced perspective.
Online at kvnutalk.com and on the KVNU mobile app.
KVNU News Time is 5:05. I'm Bill Walter with this news update brought to you by Northern Steel Building. A 21-year-old Logan man was arrested for allegedly attempting to meet up for sex with an undercover police officer posing as a 13-year-old girl. Braxton Martin was booked into the Cache County Jail on Friday after police report he drove to a Logan Park where officers were waiting. According to the arrest report, Martin began communicating with the undercover Logan City police officer on December 29th. At first, the suspect identified herself as a 16-year-old from North Logan. He then started a sexually charged conversation asking the officer about past sexual experiences and explaining some of his. The suspect later gave the officer a phone number and began texting about meeting in person. The number was traced to Martin's residence. A meeting was arranged at Logan Park where police officers were waiting, according to the report. Martin said he was driving a small dark car and communicated when he was going to be there. Police claim Martin showed up at the park and was arrested. He also had a cell phone on him, believed to be the same phone used to communicate with law enforcement. Martin reportedly admitted to police that he had been communicating with the undercover officer about performing various sex acts. Jail records show that Martin was booked was booked on 3 counts of enticing a minor by internet or text, 2 second-degree felonies and 1 third-degree felony. He was later released after posting $10,000 bail. Formal charges are pending the completion of the investigation by the police. KBNU News Time is 5:07. KBNU weather tonight, cloudy, 50% chance of snow, light accumulations possible, low near 15. And then a partly cloudy day Tuesday, high around 30. Partly cloudy, upper 20s on Wednesday. It's been to 24. It's 22 right now at KBNU. KBNU weather brought to you by Roof Rescue. Their experienced roofing team is tried and true and will fix your roof guaranteed. Visit roofrescueusa.com to schedule your free roof inspection. That's roofrescueusa.com.
A building is just a building until it's your building. It's where you work, where you create, and where you store your valuable equipment. You take pride in your building, so make sure it's built right and built to last. Northern Steel Buildings will guide you from concept to construction. For your commercial, agricultural, or industrial steel building, visit northernsteelbuilding.com to see their quality work or call 435-677-7300. Northern Steel Buildings. Value from concept to construction.
KBNU News Time is 5:08. Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson tested positive on Sunday for COVID-19, according to officials. They say she is doing well under the circumstances and looks forward to getting back to work as soon as possible. She is canceling all of her public events this week as a result. Henderson also tested positive for COVID-19 in August 2020. She said she took 2 trips to the emergency room at that time for shortness of breath and pain in her lungs. X-rays showed both fluid and inflammation in the lower lobes of both lungs. The announcement in 2020 came after 2 of her immediate family members tested positive, and she said she began to show symptoms. And thousands of Utah students will return from temporary remote learning and head back to the classroom today. It was the first day back to school in Salt Lake and Summit counties with the mask mandate no longer in place. Heidi Matthews, president of the Utah Education Association, said all these changes now leave teachers wondering what will happen next. Matthews said teachers are at their breaking point. School districts hope the few days off last week were enough to be the reset that they need. The Salt Lake City School District is encouraging everyone to wear masks and get vaccinated to help keep kids in classrooms. KBNU News Time is 5:09. For more details on these and other stories, visit CashValleyDaily.com.
News and current events. News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102.1 FM.
It's the perfect time to get rid of that old wood stove or put an insert in that old fireplace, because the state of Utah's wood stove and fireplace change-out program is back. Advanced Fireplace and Stove says let the government foot the bill up to $3,800 towards your new Heat and Glow gas insert or fireplace or Vermont casting stove. Do you live in Idaho? No worries. Idaho's change-out program is in full swing. They can assist in the Idaho wood change-out too. Advanced Fireplace and Stove, 435-753-3734 or at advancedfireplaceandstove.com.
It's the start of a new year, and your friends at Heritage Ram want to help you to look forward to 2022 with the Start Something New sales event. Get 1.9% for 60 months, plus $2,750 total bonus cash on 2021 Ram 1500 Classic Warlock Quad Cab 4x4s. Find out why Ram is the brand with the highest pickup loyalty in America, and experience the Heritage difference. The Start Something New sales event, all month long at Heritage, your hometown dealer with the biggest deals.
These are the sounds of a dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 Food Banks strong.
I have come to build a bridge, so come let's build.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Hour 2 of today's show, Monday, January 24th. I'm Jason Williams. Bill Walter here in the studio as well. Highlights of today's legislative action coming up later on this hour, where we're at on proposed income tax cuts and also proposed elimination of the state's portion of the food tax was, again, a big discussion today. So we'll get to some of the highlights. We've got some of the audio from the Senate presser today and more, a little floor debate that was fun to listen to. Kicking the hour off here, though, with a very special guest to mark a very important anniversary. In fact, Saturday marks the 159th anniversary of a tragedy here in the West, the Bear River Massacre. And joining us right now, a tribal leader with the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Tribe, Darren Parry, good friend of the show, a congressional candidate, author, teacher. It's just take your pick of titles, right, Darren?
Yeah, but mostly old man nowadays.
Well, one of the busiest old men, I think, in Utah. That's
true. That is true.
You know, the work you've done over the years, I have to start out with this, Darren, with the legislative session underway. I've heard from so many lawmakers here in Utah, even in Republican leadership, in the governor's office and more, who have said they've met you, they've talked with you, and that you've really built some bridges and got people to come together in ways that really, you know, just a decade ago wouldn't have really been possible. And so being able to talk to you ahead of this 159th anniversary, you're also a bit of a scholar on this. You wrote a book called The Bear River Massacre, a Shoshone History. That book is available, by the way, on Amazon, in local bookstores. You can reach out to Darren on social media as well. He can tell you more. But you've changed the narrative on this, as most of us were taught the history of the Bear River Massacre in social studies class in middle school and things like that. You've worked to change the narrative a little bit and get people to talk about this in a both a realistic way but a productive way, right?
Yeah, and you know what, Jason, the thing I'm most proud of is it's okay, and we're in a weird place in America and Utah as far as how we can't teach hard things in school because we don't want our kids to, I don't know if we don't want them to know it and I think that kind of gets a bad rap. And what I'm really proud of is you can talk about hard things and you can talk about a subject as brutal as the Bear River Massacre, where more than 400 Shoshones died. And I like to take people on that journey, and you take them to the edge of being really uncomfortable. But then you don't stay in that space. You take it back to, a tragedy like this happened, and a tragedy will probably happen to each one of us in our lifetime. But how we respond and go forward from there really should be the story and should determine our character and everything else. So while it's tragic, and it is tragic, and it's really all about let's learn from it and let's move forward together and make this world a better place. And so, all of us are going to experience some kind of heartache and tragedy in our lifetime, but how we respond will really go a long way in making this world a worse place or a better place. And so I've always tried to focus on the latter. We're still here. The descendants are here, and we're trying to make the best use of our time that we can to make this world a better place. And let's focus on that. What can we do together, realizing that we've all had things in our past that are not something that we really want to remember or celebrate. It's not something to celebrate, but man, you can sure learn from it and try to be better because of it.
And you've not only said this in many of your interactions with individuals, but also talks and classes that you've taught even with Utah State University, but you've led by example on this through action. You spearheaded with a, as I understand it, a really, really vibrant team of people still working hard on this, a project to create a cultural center at the original site of the Bear River Massacre, just north of Preston, Idaho, for those not familiar. And that itself was kind of a feat. You got, as I understand it, you got landowners to give up some land. You got people who are normally at war with the idea of really highlighting some of this darker history here in the West to come forward and say, no, this is important. How did all this come to be?
Gosh, I wish, you could write a book on that whole thing and how it came about, but it started little by little, and I'll tell you, I have felt the influence of those people who died that day push me along and open doors and make things really happen. That because I'm thinking there's sometimes, Jason, I sit back and go, how did that happen? How did that landowner who swore his whole life that he would never sell the land, how is it one day that I just called him out of the blue and said, I'd like to buy the land? And he says, okay, let's talk. And then, 8 months later, he sells us 550 acres.
That's amazing.
And so, just there's been doors open that really seem impossible. But I think when you approach people in the right way and in a loving and respectful way, like we can all have differences and be on different sides of the aisle of things, but when you treat each other with respect and kindness and listen, truly listen to people, I think there's just such good opportunities that we can all work together. We have so much more in common than we don't. But when you treat people the right way, I think it opens doors for possibilities that have really blossomed for us as a tribe. And so, being able to not only purchase the land in 2018, but now I'm raising money to build a beautiful interpretive center on the site that will still tell the story of our people from the perspective of the Shoshones. But not only that, as important it is to tell the story of the people, it's equally as important to tell the story of the land. And we've worked hard with Utah State University and other groups to transform that landscape, get rid of invasive species, replant species that were there in 1863. So healing the land from trauma and telling the story of the land is equally as important. And it's just awesome to see some of the work that's taking place now with the restoration of the land. And I'm still fundraising for the building, but I think we'll get there. And so if any of your listeners want to contribute, that would be awesome too.
How can people do that if they'd like to give or their time or their money?
Well, contact me if you want to volunteer some hours to planting things in the spring. We're going to have that.
Oh, wow.
Also, we have a website dedicated to it, boaogui.org. It's BOAOGOI.org. And they can make a secure donation there. Or I live here in the Cache Valley. I just moved from Providence to Avon. So, and I'm the only guy in the Avon with a teepee in his front yard. So you can't miss
So
my
far,
house.
right?
But come see me. And there's other ways. If you're old school and want to mail a check, we can do that too. So
That's amazing. And for listeners, I've linked to that boaogui.org website on our Facebook page if you're driving now and would like to find it later. There's a donate button there, a description of the mission behind all of this, and even some really interesting stuff about Shoshone history and culture. And Darren, you mentioned restoration of the land, and something I learned from you directly in our conversations, but also in reading your books. When it comes to the belief, when it comes to land and the beliefs of the Shoshone tribe, is it too much of an oversimplification to say the belief is the land doesn't belong to us, we belong to the land, and we need to then take care of it? That's also been an influential factor in your work with Utah lawmakers and others, right?
yeah, it is. In fact, I spoke Saturday at Maple Grove Hot Springs to a bunch of people soaking in the big pool, and I'm sitting on the edge telling them Shoshone stories. But I talked about how Native Americans never really believed we owned the land. We were stewards of the land, and the land was provided by the Great Spirit. And so our worldview of the land and making sure that we take care of it so that she will reproduce year after year is just it's a beautiful way to look at it. And so I just think we're stewards, and it's our responsibility to make sure we're doing everything we can to live sustainably and making sure that the generations that come next have an inheritance that they can inherit. And so that view, that Native American view of land use management is really something that has resonated to me throughout my life. And I'm grateful that a grandmother, May Timbimbu Parry, taught me some of those qualities and values.
It's great to be able to talk to you about this, and too often, Darren, we all understand these types of things, the 159th anniversary, the history, the loss of more than 400 lives for the tribe in the Bear River Massacre anniversary coming up this Saturday. What does this all mean for, as you speak with members of the tribe, what does this mean for them to be able to see this cultural center coming together, this interpretive center that will be built, for the site to be restored, and I guess, more broadly, for the conversation to reflect what happened as opposed to what we might prefer to hear in our history? How is this trickling through the tribe?
I think I love that question because I can answer it with what my grandmother told me one day. And I think the tribe is feeling that way as well. She said to me one day when I was younger, Darren, no one has ever wanted to hear our story before. One day you will have to make them listen. And so, Jason, I haven't had to make anybody listen. I think we live in a time and place now that people really want to know. And so I think what you see from tribal members today is almost a sigh of relief that finally we get to tell our story from our perspective, a perspective that's never been heard before. When Winston Churchill said that history is only written by the victors, he was absolutely correct. And so, for centuries, we've not been able to tell this story. And if we did, like my grandmother tried, no one has ever really wanted to listen. But I think we live in a time and place that people want to know. And I think there's a source of great pride today in the tribe that this is who we are. This is our story. And whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't matter. We're just finally being able to have a voice and
Sure.
to share it in the way that we want it shared. And that's really powerful to tribal members. And so I'm just happy to play a small part of that in helping move this thing forward and helping tell the story of our people.
It's amazing to watch this progress, and always a pleasure to have a chance to chat with you, Darren, here on the show. And for listeners, something else to entice you if you're interested in the book, The Bear River Massacre, A Shoshone History, by our guest, Darren Parry. Darren, this also included some, as part of that history, some recipes, some gardening tips, things like that, some from your grandmother, some from other members of the tribe. I have to say, I tried some, both the gardening tips and the recipes, and that was fun. I mean, this was honestly just the greatest experience. And back to what you said earlier in our time here about, it really being about not shying away, not being afraid to tell the actual history, but then turning from that to, where we go from here. The book really exemplifies that. You spend a lot of time on that very theme as you tell the actual history of the massacre.
I do, because it just brings us back to all being in the same space. And that's why I think I have such a wonderful relationship with people of a conservative nature, people that are liberal. I mean, just all different aspects of where we fall politically. I think, being able to talk like that, we all have something in common, that we all want this world to be a better place. We all have different ideas on how to get there. But certainly when you approach it in a way that is not confrontational and just in a loving, respectful way, I think, magical things can happen in our community when those things happen. And I see it. I see it every day.
Darren, always a pleasure to have you here on the show. And for listeners, one more time, you can pick up a copy of the book, The Bear River Massacre, A Shoshone History, at local bookstores. It's available on Amazon, has some great stuff in it, including the actual history. If you'd like to support the ongoing work to build and finalize this process of restoring the land and building a cultural interpretive center there at the site of the Bear River Massacre, that website again, which means, Darren, you taught me this, Big River, boaogui.org, BOAOGOI.org, and I've linked to that on our Facebook page. And our guest again has been a tribal leader with the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Tribe, Darren Parry. And Darren, once again, a pleasure to have you here on the show, and we look forward to seeing more of your work here in Utah to bring this history forward and build some bridges.
Well, thank you, Jason. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and I enjoy it. So stay safe, my friend.
You as well, and the pleasure is all ours. For listeners, please stay tuned. We'll be back with more of For the People right after this.
Tuesday edition, Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show. What is the latest in Ukraine? Stock market pummeled right now. What can we do to get back on track economically? We'll discuss all that. Plus, Buck.
We'll be joined by Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War, on what should the U.S. government do about China, the Olympics coming up, and much more. That'll be on the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show.
10 to 1 on News Talk KVNU, 102 FM and 610 AM.
I'm Larry Gelwigs, the getaway guru for Morris Columbus Travel and Norwegian Cruise Line. Cruising is back with free airfare for the second guest, 30% off your cruise fare, and on select cruises, the third, fourth, and fifth guests sharing your cabin sail free. Just pay the taxes. That's free air, free cruises, and 30% off. For the best travel deals on the planet, call Morris Columbus Travel.
Come on and get away, Morris Columbus.
My Shiro doesn't always wear a cape, but she always has time for a hug, a smile, for going the extra mile. My Shiro stretches every dollar, puts in long hours, puts others first. But now it's your time, Mom. When you're ready to retire, we want you to be able to enjoy it. Get free tips to help boost your retirement savings now at aceyourretirement.org/Shiro.
A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Coming up, highlights from day one of week 2 of the legislative session. Lawmakers today discussing everything from education bills and funding to proposed income tax cut, a proposed elimination of the sales tax, state portion of the sales tax on food, transportation funding, where the legislature goes with what is a pretty rosy outlook right now, revenue-wise, thanks in part to a great economy here in Utah especially, but even nationwide. That means there's a lot of collected taxes being collected by the state. Also, federal funding through both coronavirus or pandemic-related aid packages, but also the infrastructure bill, which got a lot of discussion today, including, we've got the audio for you coming up, the first glimpse at what Utah lawmakers plan to do with some of this federal money coming through that infrastructure bill passed a few months ago when it makes its way to Utah, which it already has. They have until 2023 to spend all of the money Utah gets, which is billions, and it is a lot of it, at least, going to go, well, towards infrastructure, obviously, but Senate leaders today unveiled a plan to spend a sizable chunk of this federal money on expanding broadband to rural areas here in Utah, but the debate over how was really very interesting. We've got the audio for that coming up. Before the break there, our guest, Darren Parry, tribal leader with the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Tribe and author of The Bear River Massacre, a Shoshone history, available in local bookstores and online. He mentioned, when we were talking about building bridges, he said, there's a thing happening right now in which there's a debate. It's coming up during our legislative session here as well, via a couple of bills. He said there's an unfortunate debate about whether or not we should teach the less rosy side of our history and whether that's a good thing. And Darren said, we shouldn't ever be afraid to talk about these darker times in our history or things that we're not so proud of as a country or even as individuals. Darren said, where it matters for your character is not that you made the mistakes, but what you do having acknowledged the mistakes and going forward. With that in mind, this was something that, again, came up during the legislative session a bit today. There a couple of bills that seek to put some restrictions on teachers were a part of the debate during the committee hearings today. This hasn't made it to floor time yet. No action was taken, but it reminded me of something that I just watched last night. The Sundance Film Festival, of course, is going on, and it's all virtual this year, so I was just watching from home. One of the films that I had tickets to was called Riotsville, USA, and it's a history of another side of the 1960s civil rights movement, told through purely archival footage. The window to see it at Sundance is closed. In fact, I watched it last night, and that was the last night you can watch it until it gets some wider release, which I assume it would. But there was also a Q&A that went along with it, and it was fascinating to me because as a transparency junkie, they talked a little bit about the importance of public records and archives and archivists, people like we have here in the state of Utah, whose job it is to make sure things get recorded and archived in a proper way. And they talked also about the story that can be told, which Riotsville, USA tells as a film, the story that can be told just by making note of what is and isn't archived and what is and isn't considered an important piece of history. This was a movie made from archival footage from the military and the media coverage of specific events, specifically in the years 1966 to 68 and the riots of the Democratic National Convention that year. But it's all archival footage, mostly from the military, talking about how they were training both members of the National Guard and the Army, but also local police departments to respond to riots, to respond to what they were afraid was going to become just an even worse situation than it was. And it tells that story again through a side you've never seen of the civil rights movement, the response to that, the people who were actively seeking to tamp it down. And so it tells these dual stories, the importance of public records and making note of what does and doesn't get archived and become, consumable for the public, and also what the archives themselves have to say about history as a full picture, not just the things you know and that are readily taught in schools as part of history, but also the things that never really came to light because at the time people weren't interested. It's a fascinating story, and I was reminded of that when Darren talked about not being afraid to face your history, not wanting to sanitize or scrub your history. That's a weak thing to do. A strong thing to do is, and the film points this out as well, to acknowledge your history, teach your history, know your history as a country, and then remember that your character as an individual, as a country, as Darren said, is built not on your mistakes of the past, but what you decide to do going forward. It's a really cool message. Check it out, though. Keep an eye out for Riotsville, USA, a fascinating look that, again, tells two stories, not only an alternate history, not alternate history, a history of the civil rights movement told from alternate perspectives as opposed to those you're used to, but also the story of the importance of government transparency and public records archiving. Two things you wouldn't think would go together and be very exciting to watch. It was actually fascinating. So Riotsville, USA will be out. I believe it's hitting Amazon Prime in a couple of months. So make note of that and check it out. The first film I've seen from the Sundance Film Festival, all virtual this year. And we'll be back with more of KVNU's For the People, highlights from today's legislative session, day one of week 2, after these headlines with KVNU's Bill Walter.
Thank you, Jason. KBNU News Time is 5:36, and this look at the news brought to you by Mount Logan Laundry. Logan City School District Education Board continues to gather patron input regarding the proposed elementary school boundary adjustments, with the last public hearing meeting set for tomorrow. Logan City School District Superintendent Frank Schofield said the district wants to ensure maximizing the efficiency of physical resources, promote the safety of students, and balance demographics of each school in the district. The adjustments would help transition Hillcrest to a dual language immersion magnet school and help mitigate the rapid enrollment growth on the west side of the district. One of the suggestions the board has received is to make Ellis and Woodruff all walking schools, but this adjustment would increase the enrollment at Woodruff, which could potentially create an issue with the growth expected in the Woodruff boundary. Mount Logan Middle School and Logan High School will not be affected by the boundary changes. A teenager was hospitalized after a sledding incident while at an event about sledding safety, officials stated. Lone Peak Fire District officials said they had just arrived at Intermountain Healthcare's event on Saturday when they were informed of someone who got injured sledding. KUTV reports the injured 16-year-old boy reportedly sustained a serious laceration on the back of his head and was airlifted to Primary Children's Hospital in stable condition. Lone Peak Fire District Captain Brant Godwin said a helicopter had been called because it would have taken too long to get the teen out otherwise. He said it happened in the bowl area in Tibble Fork Reservoir, which is where many injuries are reported. And police are investigating after a shooting that left one person dead Sunday morning. KUTV reports the incident happened in the area of 100 South and 800 West shortly before 9:30 a.m. in Salt Lake. According to a statement from the Salt Lake City Police Department, officers responded to a call of a possible shooting. When police arrived, they found an adult victim who had been shot. Officers and paramedics provided immediate life-saving efforts, but the victim died on the scene, according to the statement. Officials have not released the identity of the victim pending notification of family, and no arrests have been made. Through the preliminary investigation, it appears this is an isolated incident and there is no imminent danger to the public, according to a statement from the Salt Lake City Police Department. And the year 2020 marks 100 years of business for Utah State University's Aggie Creamery. To celebrate the centennial, the Creamery is hosting a series of events as well as in-store and online monthly giveaways with prizes from local businesses. New limited flavors of ice cream plus several retro flavors will be available throughout the year to commemorate the anniversary. The Aggie Creamery will give away 3 grand prizes in January, a 1-year supply of free Aggie ice cream, a Beaver Mountain ski, and an Aggie staycation, which includes an overnight stay at a local hotel and $125 in Bluebird chocolate. To enter to win, visit Aggie Ice Cream and scan the QR code found in store. KBNU weather, 50% chance of snow, light accumulations possible. Low tonight, overnight near 15, and then partly cloudy and around 30 degrees on Tuesday. It was 24 today. Right now it's 21. And the weather brought to you by Berenson Caldwell. When the bills from your accident pile up, it's time for you to consider professional legal advice. It's time for you to get the Bear. Berenson Caldwell. Visit berensonlaw.com. For more details on these and other stories, visit CashValleyDaily.com.
The colder weather is here. Are your quilts and blankets looking dingy? Is your winter coat or jacket dirty enough to stand in the corner just by itself? Well, go to Mount Logan Laundry. It'll take no time at all to freshen up everything. They have the 55 and 80-pound washers, the biggest around, and great big dryers, too, and it costs a whole lot less than dry cleaning. Free Wi-Fi and drop-off service. Mount Logan Laundry really is the cleanest spot in town, on the corner of 5th East, 9th North in Logan, or in Brigham at 1st East, 7th South. Mount Logan Laundry.
This is Dr. Red, chiropractic physician with Red River Health and Wellness. Are you suffering with fatigue, brain fog, headaches, intestinal issues, weight gain, and you haven't been able to find any answers?
I've constantly been fighting with my weight and thyroid issues for more than 25 years, and none of the doctors in 25 years have ever been able to explain to me what Hashimoto's is, what it means to me, and how to manage it.
Red River Health and Wellness can help you.
Today, my life is like the minute I get out of bed, I hit the ground running. I'm ready to go. I want to see what today is going to bring, what adventures I'm going to have without pain and with all the energy to do everything that I want to do.
Our goal is to teach you and educate you so you know how to manage your condition a lot more effectively and you know what to do and what not to do for the rest of your life. With our satisfaction guarantee, you have nothing to lose.
Call Red River at 855-55-RIVER to schedule an in-depth consultation absolutely free. All appointments can be done remotely by FaceTime, Skype, or phone.
The Cache Valley Cruise-In welcomes Get the Boot Fit. Granger Smith. You're in it. Headline entertainment for this year's Cruise-In concert with special guest Earl Dibbles Jr. Out of these city boys running their mouth. And opening act, Sawyer Brown. Oh, but some girls do. Buy your tickets at Lee's Marketplace or online on the Cache Valley Cruise-In website. The Cache Valley Cruise-In concert is Thursday, June 30th.
Learning your child has cancer causes an emotional and financial crisis. Often, the best place for treatment is far from home. But with the help of the National Children's Cancer Society, children battling cancer can get to life-saving treatment, whether it's across town or across the country. To learn how we give families hope and give their children the best shot at survival, visit thenccs.org. That's THENCCS.org. Because no family should go through childhood cancer alone.
Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. Day one of week 2 of the legislative session is, well, still going on. They'll probably work up until maybe 6 o'clock tonight, or they'll wrap up in the next few minutes. Either way, it was a mostly quiet day. Committees debated bills on everything from education funding to proposals to make significant changes to transportation funding. Where those things go, we have no idea, honestly. It's the legislative session is they're playing it close to their vest when it comes to revenue, proposed tax cuts, and more. One bit of news on the income tax front and the elimination of the food sales tax front came during legislative briefing today. Early in the morning, lawmakers announced in the Senate that now where the House is at could be different, but in the Senate, it sounds like they've coalesced around. Remember, there were 4, 5, maybe 6 competing proposals for an income tax cut. One was to the original from Senator Jerry Stevenson, who chairs the Senate Finance Committee. Basically, the person who chairs the committee that gets to decide where all the money goes. That's literally his job and the committee's job. And the House usually has a few tweaks and changes and contributions, but mainly the state budget process is driven by the Senate committee. And Senator Jerry Stevenson chairs that committee. He's done that for a really long time, and he's a very smart guy. He can talk about numbers, not quite as well as former State Senator Lyle Hilliard could when discussing the budget here on the show, but close. He's close to that, talented at dumbing it down for the rest of us. And he announced today that of these competing proposals, one, the slimmest, was a proposal, which was his, proposal to go from 4.95 income tax rate here in Utah to 4.90, a 0.05 income tax cut. The Salt Lake Tribune crunched the numbers on that, and it'd basically be about $20 a month for the median income earners here in Utah, people who make the average wage here in Utah. So not really an eye popper. $20 is $20, I guess. But so the House, they came back with their own proposals. One that was to go down to 4.1, which got nowhere. That was an unrealistic proposal from one lawmaker in the House. The next from the House was 4.6. And then there was another proposal from the Senate to go to 4.7. And then today, and there were a few in between there, but then today, Senator Jerry Stevenson basically said they've coalesced around 4.85. So basically a 1% reduction in income tax here in Utah is where he, at least in their discussions, believes most decision makers are at, to go from 4.95 to 4.85. As far as the elimination of the state portion of the sales tax on food, the Senate leadership today in their daily press briefing said they're not opposed to it, but it's not as important to them as the income tax break, paraphrasing there, of course. But they're not outright opposed to the idea of eliminating the state portion of the sales tax on food. And remember, there's a bit of politics on it. Sometimes our legislature, in addition to being a very power-hungry and siloed body, they like to believe they are the best decision makers in the state, and they try to consolidate all the power under their arms. And they've done that for decades, successfully, unfortunately. But they also can be kind of petty at times. And so politics does play into this a little bit, because remember, lawmakers were forced by the public to, in what was basically an embarrassing moment for them, they passed a tax reform package in December in a special session, and then had to repeal it on the first day of the legislative session in 2020 before the pandemic began and they were meeting in person, because the public backlash was so huge. In fact, public backlash was so energetic that several lawmakers didn't get reelected the following fall in November of 2020, due primarily to their support of raising the tax on food here in Utah. That was not a popular move, but the lawmakers kind of jammed it in there and rammed it through, and it blew up in their faces. And so they're still smarting from that a little bit. So talk of eliminating the sales tax on food after having to eat crow and repeal their own tax reform bill after raising the sales tax on food, that might be a big chunk of why they're not as eager to have this debate right now. It's still a little sore from that public lashing, but we'll see. Again, Senate leaders say they're not opposed to it, but their primary focus right now is an income tax cut, likely to be about 1% at this point. It might change a little bit. You might see it go up to, say, 1.3 or down to 0.8, but somewhere around there is likely where they're going to land, Senator Stevenson said today. He did also, though, present another side to all of this. Remember, heading into this session, revenue forecasts looked great. The economy nationwide and here in Utah looked solid. They were wrapping up the previous fiscal year, with a $600 million surplus. Utah wasn't as expensive to run as they had thought it would be when they passed that budget. So everything looking rosy, and the legislature has a lot of your money to do something with. So Senator Stevenson, in addition to that, they've got federal funds that have kind of propped up the state budget for a couple of years now. They still have ARPA funds to send. This was the first post-Trump aid package. You remember they had a big aid package passed by the Trump administration, or passed by Congress during the Trump administration, signed by the president, and then they had another big aid package passed by Congress and signed by the following president, President Biden. So two big aid packages coming to you, federal money coming to Utah, really took some pressure off state coffers as far as running the state. And then passage a few months ago of the infrastructure bill goes towards that even more. And Senator Stevenson speaks to that in this audio you're about to hear. He says, a lot of this federal money that's coming in for infrastructure, which can go to transportation, broadband expansion, smartening up our electric grid, all kinds of things like that. He said that can be absorbed into the state budget, which gives them even more money to work with as far as what they can spend your money on this year. So that was basically the foundation for the conversation before Senator Stevenson just let loose with the other side to all this. Yes, the revenue picture looks great, he said, but they've known for a long time there are certain areas of the state that to keep taxes low in Utah, they've been underfunding, from education to a lot of our own infrastructure. Here's what Senator Stevenson had to say as he laid out the complexities of what they're trying to do with this year's budget, federal money, state revenue forecasts to look rosy, and some bills about to come due, as he puts it.
We moved a lot of numbers across the board because there are a lot of, we've got a lot of revenue this year to work with. We still only have about $290 million in ongoing money and well in excess of $1 billion in one-time money. But we do have some, we know there are some things we have not adequately funded. One would be probably compensation. Two would be education. Three, there's still lots of places that we need to be looking for infrastructure. And part of the issue this year, and you'll find that things will probably come out a little bit slower than they have in the past, but we're still dealing with ARPA funds, where to move them and how that fits in with the infrastructure money we're getting from the federal government, because it's causing some of the ARPA funding actually to move inside the budget. We'll make sure it's moved to where it's classified and can work. But if we're getting a lot of money, I'm going to use telecommunications or cable out in rural Utah, for instance. We can bring a lot of that money is coming to us, it looks like, through the infrastructure bill. And if that comes to us in the infrastructure bill, we can probably move some of the ARPA money to, say, water or a different project. So those are some of the things we're dealing with, and they're all big. We do know that we set aside a block for employee compensation. It's probably not enough with what's going on in our society right now.
Senator Stevenson said that it's important to remember that, even though it's billions, a lot of this is one-time money. Most of it is one-time money, so how they spend it needs to be very strategic. On the issue of expanding broadband, he said they would focus on rural areas that are suffering right now without access to broadband, and part of that would mean, finally actually mapping the state as opposed to relying on internet service providers to fill in the map themselves. Stevenson said it gets even more complicated when you're talking about water. If they're going to use any of this infrastructure money to help our water situation here in Utah, should another drought year be ahead of us or another drought come along anytime soon, Stevenson said that's where it gets even more complicated when you're talking about spending strategically.
So I think the big rule would be to see if there's any new water out there, which we don't believe there is a lot of new water in the state of Utah. So it will be funding conservation. Metering will be a big piece of what we're doing. I think that's already been indicated, but we could actually spend several times on metering what we've set aside for metering.
Will you be funding pipeline projects?
Pipeline, there's still some things will be up to the legislature later on. I guess it's a possibility, but those are big projects, and I think we're going to have to figure out how to pay for some of the larger ones.
And finally, on the tax cut front, Senator Vickers announced that the guides on the income tax bill, Senate Bill 59, the vehicle, as they call it, for this income tax discussion that will go on throughout the session, to be honest with you. We won't have final word on that until, I would guess, the final week of the session. Maybe, but probably not. Until then, Senate President Stuart Adams said that in the Senate, it transferred from Vickers to McKay. In the House, our own Representative Casey Snyder will be the guide on the income tax bill. And again, Senator Vickers said that what he's just amended the bill, where he believes everyone's at, is to go from 4.95% income tax to 4.85.
And that brings it down, Senator Vickers, I see from your amendment on the bill to 4.85 then, is that right?
Yes, yeah.
The income tax.
And there's some other things that could potentially go into that bill. We're still working on a couple of other pieces, but that would be the income tax portion of it right now.
Has the caucus determined how it feels about, the majority caucus, determined how it feels about the governor's food tax credit proposal?
I could say, that's still part of the discussion. That our number one priorities has been and still is income tax.
Senator Vickers responding there to the final question. The governor, there's the bill that would propose an elimination of the sales tax on food here in Utah through the legislative process. The governor has proposed that they run a bill offering instead a food tax credit. Senator Vickers saying their priority remains an income tax cut. Later on in this briefing, though, Senate President Stuart Adams said they are not opposed in any way to a sale cut or elimination of the sales tax on food or a sales tax on food credit. It's just not their priority debate right now. We'll see where it goes. But there you have it, an update from legislative action today, most of it in the Utah State Senate. The House gets their turn tomorrow, and Senate President Stuart Adams said the income tax bill will actually be in committee Wednesday morning. So we'll see what the final numbers look like. And if you'd like to follow along yourself, le.utah.gov is the legislative website where all of this streams each and every hour of the session, each and every day for 45 days. We'll be back with more of KVNU's For the People right after this.
NMLS 1817019.
From our Freedom Loan that covers 100% of your closing costs to our $1,000 lowest rate guarantee. As Utah's premier mortgage broker, LendRight Mortgage shops the top lenders in the country to find you the absolute lowest rate and fees. We often beat other lenders' rates by 1/4 to 0.5%. That means a lower mortgage payment for you, which can save you tens of thousands over the life of your loan. Compare us to any lender. If we can't save you a minimum of $1,000, we'll give you $1,000. Nobody does what LendRight Mortgage does. Nobody. See our rates and get a free quote on your purchase or refinance. Call 801-APPROVE or visit lendrightmortgage.com. Crushing other lenders is our specialty. Call 801-APPROVE or visit lendrightmortgage.com.
Cache County homeowners, do you have a wood-burning stove or fireplace? Have Chim Chimney and Logan replace it with a gas insert or stove to receive a $2,800 to $4,000 state grant. Sign up now at stoves.utah.gov to receive an application. You can find out more about the program at chimchimney.com or by calling 435-755-9990. That's Chim Chimney in Logan and Brigham City. They sell, service, and install.
Pristine wilderness can still be found in the West, where creeks run freely and historic apple trees still bear fruit. Maple Creek Ranch features breathtaking canyon views and opportunities for real estate development. 2.5-acre lots are now available with adjacent wilderness areas that provide endless riding and recreational possibilities. So find your piece of paradise just 35 minutes from Logan at Maple Creek Ranch. Schedule your appointment online at maplecreekranch.net.
Hi, this is Gordon Deal. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. More damaging findings from the latest polling data. President Biden is not only losing swing voters, he's losing support from his base. Also, as you've noticed, store shelves are less full of groceries. We'll explain the latest reason the food supply is under pressure and why some parents should brace for a lower tax refund this year. Tuesday on This Morning, America's First News. From 4 to 6 on News Talk KVNU, 610 AM and 102 FM. Your station for news and talk.
That is our time for today. Thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow on For the People, with all this talk of expanding broadband in Utah, how would we go about doing that? Well, one nonprofit says they have a plan, and they've just been waiting for someone to ask. They'll be our guest tomorrow on the show. Dave Ramsey is next here on KVNU Logan.
Falling in love with you.
News Talk KVNU, Logan, the home for Logan High basketball. 102 FM, 610 AM, and online at kvnutalk.com.